Donald Trump just posted that he would make prescription drug and pharmaceutical prices will be reduced almost immediately by 30 to 80%. You can see, I guess he's doing this through executive order, right? We're getting pharma price controls from the Republicans. Oh shit, dude! I can't believe the left getting outflanked by the right wing. What the heck? Let's have a look. See. For many years, the world has wondered why prescription drugs and pharmaceuticals in the United States of America were so much higher in price than they were in any other nation, sometimes 5 to 10 times more expensive than the same drug manufactured in the exact same laboratory or plant by the same company. Oh, I can answer that question. It's really easy. It's because Medicare and Medicaid do not have the ability to negotiate for drug prices. Now, that was a proposal that was done on like 10 different drugs under the Biden administration, specifically with insulin. Insulin was brought down to pretty cheap, about $35 a vial, I think. Something like that. Instead of like the outrageous like 200 something crazy amounts that was before. But what do you have here? It was always difficult to explain and very embarrassing because, in fact, there was no correct or rightful answer. I just gave you the answer. The problem is the for-profit motive that exists within the United States for pharmaceuticals. That's why. Like I did that instantaneously, but I guess Trump must think it's a different reason. All right. Let's see. The pharmaceutical/drug companies would say for many years that it was research and development costs. He's not wrong when he says that. He is correct when he says that that is a bullshit excuse that a lot of pharmaceutical companies say. This is true. And that all of these costs were and would be, for no reason whatsoever, borne by the suckers of America alone. So, yeah, there is a lot of subsidies that are given by the federal government to the pharmaceutical companies for them to do R&D for a lot of research on drugs. And for what benefit are the American people getting out of this? Basically nothing. And the companies get to make a killing in terms of profit when they sell and patent these drugs. And the government basically gets nothing out of it. So, yeah, okay, sure. We are going to do the right thing, something that Democrats have fought for many years. True. Therefore, I am pleased to announce that tomorrow morning in the White House at 9 a.m., I will be signing one of the most consequential executive orders in our country's history. Prescription drug and pharmaceutical prices will be reduced almost immediately by 30 to 80%. Okay, great, fantastic. How is he doing that? Is he going to allow the state to have negotiations with the pharmaceutical companies that have been overcharging and overpricing people for pharmaceuticals? Because that's the reason why they're as expensive as they are, Trump. That's the reason. They will rise throughout the world in order to equalize and, for the first time in many years, bring fairness to America. Wait. They will rise throughout the world in order to equalize and, for the first time in many years, bring fairness to America. Wait, what? Time out. What does he mean? What does he mean by that? we broadly speaking, we know why these are going up in terms of. Is he trying to like blame the world for the fact that Americans are paying so much for pharmaceuticals? No, the reason why they're paying so much for pharmaceuticals is because the companies, the pharmaceutical companies that exist in the U.S., make you pay upcharge prices for them. That's why. It's not because of anything in particular that, X country or Y country are doing that's complete fucking nonsense. It's because corporations don't have to negotiate their prices with, well, like say Medicare or Medicaid in order to bring back down the prices of prescription drugs. This is exactly what the Biden administration did, albeit very limited, with like 10 different drugs, and their prices plummeted, specifically with insulin, right? Insulin was very expensive, and a lot of people needed it to live. A lot of people were dying because they were forced to have to ration their insulin. Biden made it such that hey Jack, you got to negotiate with Medicaid in order to ration out to give out insulin, Jack. And that was why, because of I don't think it was an executive order that Joe Biden did, but because of that legislation that was put through that no, I think it was I think it was an executive order by Joe Biden, right? Because Trump revoked that. What are insulin prices right now in the U.S.? What are insulin prices in the U.S.? Did he revoke it in the U.S.? I know he's been revoking a bunch of stuff for what? He's been revoking a bunch of stuff for like cancer research and stuff like that. Because who cares about researching cancer? Fuck that shit. It's still $35 per month for Medicare enrollees. Yeah, because Medicare, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, that was one of the things that happened with the Inflation Reduction Act, making it such that Medicare now negotiates for drug prices specifically for that, right? So I was about to say, did Trump get rid of that? I don't think he did. I didn't see any indication that he would. So still, have programs that cap out-of-pocket costs for all U.S. residents at $35 a month. This is under the IRA. Insulin pricing is weird because there's a bunch of variants, and some people take two. That is true. There is a bunch of variants that can exist, but it also depends on like the insurance, if you're like enrolled in Medicare and Medicaid and like shit like that, right? There's a bunch of different like factors for it. So, okay, but he's trying to like blame the prices of pharmaceutical companies. They will rise throughout the world in order to equalize for the first time in many years, bring fairness to America. So he's trying to blame other countries for the reasonings as to why like pharmaceuticals are as expensive as they are in America. No, that is not the reasoning. It's the fault of the corporations. So again, it's complete fucking slop, as always. Not blaming the fucking corporations from our so-called fucking populists, because they're the common factor. They're the reasons for as to why Medicaid and Medicare, or like why pharmaceuticals are as expensive as they are in the United States. Not because of fucking like public services. We just saw with insulin prices, public services are helping it bring it down. So, so much for the populism of the Trump administration. I will be instituting a most favored nations policies, whereby the United States will pay the same price as the nation that pays the lowest price anywhere in the world. Wait, hold on. What if, let's say, like, I don't know, Eli Lilly or Johnson & Johnson make a particular pharmaceutical, right? And they're selling it for a marked up price to other people. Also, it depends on the fucking countries, right? A lot of different medical sort of like state institutions that negotiate for drug prices, where they import drugs from other countries, they have different negotiation rates for what those prices should be in those countries.
Bing bing bang
like,
bang bing bing bing.
To basically say that it needs to be equivocated to every country is fucking stupid. Because other countries, depending on the policies that they have, can negotiate for different prices in different ways. So it's complete nonsense. This isn't going to accomplish anything, because it's just like, well, this country negotiates this pricing for this drug, and this country negotiates this pricing for this other drug. But okay, sure. Our country will finally be treated fairly, and our citizens' healthcare costs will be reduced by numbers never even thought before. Additionally, on top of everything else, the United States will save trillions of dollars. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Make America great again. So, broadly speaking, like, this isn't going to probably accomplish what Trump is going to think that it's accomplishing, because other countries, in terms of, like, drug negotiations, when they're state provided healthcare, when they negotiate for drug prices, those vary between different countries. There's different policies for that. So trying to institute how it works based on, all of these different countries that have different negotiation rates is not going to accomplish anything, and it's just going to make everything more confusing. But what do we have here? Trump signs executive order setting 30-day deadline for drug makers to lower prescription drug costs. So there's a 30-day deadline for drug makers to lower the drug costs. Okay. As per the AP, President Donald Trump on Monday has signed a sweeping executive order setting a 30-day deadline for drug makers to effectively lower the cost of prescription drugs in the U.S. or face new limits down the road over what the government will pay. The order calls on the Health Department, led by RFK Jr., to broker new price tags, and over the next month, if deals are not reached, Kennedy will be tasked with developing a new rule that ties the price that U.S. pays for medications to lower prices paid by other countries. So basically, they're trying to do this in like the stupidest, most roundabout way possible, right? Trying to like blame and follow the basis of what other countries pay, when other countries, how it works for them, like I explained earlier, it's completely varied. There's no two countries alike in terms of how their state-provided healthcare pays for particular drugs. There's no formula in particular, right? That's like general and broadly consistent. Depending on the policy, other countries pay for other certain amounts depending on the drug. Like, it's silly. We're going to equalize, Trump said during a Monday morning press conference. We're all going to pay the same. We're going to pay what Europe pays. So he's basing it off of what the Europeans negotiate for pharmaceuticals? Okay. It is unclear what, if any, impact the Republican president's executive order will have on millions of Americans who have private health insurance. The federal government has the most power to shape the price it pays for drugs covered by Medicare and Medicaid. Right, like we just saw with, with the Inflation Reduction Act. Biden made it such that Medicare negotiates prices for insulin. That's how you're supposed to do it. Leverage the, money and the power of the federal government against these private institutions that make the drugs and sell the drugs, and be like, you're going to cap the price here, whether you like it or not. And it's just like, well, we can't fight against that because we can't compete against Medicare or Medicaid. So, yep, we're going to cap our prices. Cool. Now, the best way to do this is if there's state, like the NHS, right? State-affiliated, like, pharmaceutical companies that produce these, so that they all get the same tax funding and they all get paid, like, the same amount of price, and it's all handled by state funding. But, well, we don't really fucking live in that reality, unfortunately. Trump's promise, but uncertain savings on drug prices, just hours after the Republican-led House released its new plan to trim $880 billion from Medicaid. Yeah, I kind of forgot about that. The Republicans are trying to cut Medicaid, which means it's going to be more difficult for Medicaid to fucking negotiate drug prices. Whoops. Yeah, it's going to be a lot harder to get your fucking insulin now because of this shit. So that's cool. Great. Fantastic. Taxpayers spend hundreds of billions of dollars on prescription drugs, injectables, transfusions, and other medications every day or every year through Medicare, which covers nearly 70 million older Americans. Medicaid, which provides nearly free healthcare for most 80 million poor and disabled people in the U.S., also spends tens of billions of dollars each year on for drugs. Yeah, so this nearly $1 trillion cut to Medicaid, which is unfortunately probably gonna fucking pass through like whatever budget resolution nonsense happens, is gonna make it such that it's way harder for poor people to get their fucking drugs that they need to survive. Uh-oh. Top U.S. drug makers say Trump's order is bad for patients. The nation's pharmaceutical lobby, which represents the top U.S. drug makers, immediately pushed back against Trump's order, calling it a bad deal for American patients. Drug makers have long argued that any threats to their profits could impact the research they do to develop new drugs. So obviously that's the problem that these motherfuckers are going to have. Right? It's like, guys, we need to make a lot of money, even though they already make all the fucking money. Cool. Importing foreign prices from socialist countries would be a bad deal for American patients and workers. Yeah, he wants to base this off of the very well-known socialist Europe. Sure, man. Stephen J. Ubel, the president and CEO of Pharma, said in a statement, "It would mean less treatments and cures would jeopardize the hundreds of billions of member companies companies are planning to invest in America." Poor baby, you won't be able to make so many more fucking whatever the fuck money off of drugs. But I mean, the problem is that it's very weird. Like, so they're gonna base it off of the drug prices from Europe. That's how they're gonna work. It's really strange. I'm trying to think. Like, again, this whole framing of focusing it around particular nations is the sort of problem here. Because let's be honest here, Trump is a fascist, and obviously with RFK Jr., we've talked about this before. RFK Jr. hates people who are fucking disabled because, and it's the same with this motherfucker over here, Mehmet Uz. Like, he also fucking hates people who are fucking disabled because a lot of people who are disabled have to rely more and more on the state in order to be able to, well, survive. And a lot of people get disabled through, well, extenuating circumstances that are, broadly speaking, very much so out of their control. An accident happens, maybe like a workplace hazard. Maybe they were born with a particular like disease or something, that genetic disease that they can't do anything about. They just rolled bad on the fucking genetic dice, and it's just like, well, get fucked. You know, just you rolled bad. Unfortunate. Sucks to suck, nerd. Should have just like rolled better on the hormonal distributions from your fucking parents when that shit happened. These people do not like the fact that these people have to rely on the dole of the state, and in order to be able to survive. They don't see them as like being able to be productive for the nation. And guess who else thought like that? The Nazis. One of the people that the Nazis significantly had persecutions against, were disabled people. Why? Because they saw disabled people as not being able to contribute to the good of the nation. Your body, your soul, your will, your mind, everything under fascist states, under like the Nazis in particular, everything had to be given to the state. And that's how these motherfuckers also think as well. Trump's so-called most favored nation approach to Medicare drug pricing has been controversial since he first tried to implement it during his first term. He signed a similar executive order in the final weeks of his presidency, which called for the U.S. to only pay a lower price that other countries pay for some drugs, such as injectables or cancer drugs given through infusions, administered in a doctor's office. That narrow executive order faced hurdles, with a court order that blocked the rule from going into effect under President Joe Biden's administration. The pharmaceutical industry argued that Trump's 2020 attempt would give foreign governments the upper hand in deciding the value of medicines in the U.S. I mean, this is technically true that that could fucking happen, but again, the thing is blaming other countries for this isn't the problem. That's stupid, right? The problem is isn't other countries, it's the fact that the US does not negotiate for their own prices. That's the issue. Trump says other countries are to blame. Trump repeatedly defended pharmaceutical companies. Instead of blaming other countries for the high price pay, or repeatedly, not blamed, Trump repeatedly defended pharmaceutical companies, instead blaming other countries for the high price American pay for drugs. During a wide-ranging speech at the White House on Monday, the president was flanked by Kennedy, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator Dr. Mehmet Oz, Food and Drug Administrator Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary, and National Institutes of Health Director Jay Bhattacharya. So, this is pretty much the main thing that I was just talking about here. The problem isn't the fact that other countries are paying less for drugs. What countries do is they negotiate those prices with their companies, or when they have to import drugs. They say, like, no, there's this cap, and you're going to follow this cap. You're still going to get your cut, your profit, or whatever, but you can only make people pay this much for these drugs. That's how it works. But Trump is, like, doing this, like, roundabout way of, like, doing this. Like, just like it happened under the Inflation Reduction Act. Biden capped it to $35 per month for insulin costs. And that's been incredibly fucking effective. It's just really, really fucking stupid the way that they're approaching this, saying like, no, it's other countries to blame, that's why they lower prices, when it's just like, what are you talking about? There's a particular policy in place that makes it such that they pay for lower drug prices. You just implement the same policy and boom, you leverage the power of the state through Medicare and Medicaid, because no private company can fucking compete with those, especially since those are pretty popular programs, right, in the threadbare social safety net that exists throughout the United States. You make it such that they can't compete against those, so they are forced to have to bring their drug prices down. I hate Dr. Oz so much. He wants disabled people to beg for care. Pretty much. Like, these people, these people don't give a shit. Like, they're saying that they're going along with this idiotic stuff, not because they actually care for people, but because, like, they just want people to suffer. They want people who are on the dole of the state to just, well, honestly die, which is how, like, the Nazis also fucking thought. He did, however, threaten the companies with federal investigations into their practices and opening up the U.S. drug market to bring in more imported medications from other countries. The pharmaceutical companies make the most of their profits from America, Trump said. That's not a good thing. It is true. But the problem is the way he is going about this problem is, like, really stupid and backwards. You know, when the populist actually tries to do something, instead of blaming the corporations, he defends the corporations. And he's blaming other countries for the high prices. That doesn't make any sense. They had nothing to do with this. The corporations have basically no regulations and can charge whatever the fuck they want arbitrarily for these drugs. That's the problem. You need to do regulation to bring them in line, which is what was done in the Inflation Reduction Act. But whatever. None of these people actually give a shit. Trump played up the announcement over the weekend, boasting in one post that his plan could save trillions of dollars. But on Monday, the White House offered no specific for how much money the administration anticipates it could save. Of course, he just pretends. He's literally so skilled but turns so evil, probably via narcissism and tiger parenting in the Turkish sense. Oh, you're talking about Dr. Oz? Probably. What? He got elevated through Oprah, and that's why he, became like a TV doctor and shit like that? Now you know. The health department's top leaders will be meeting with drug company executives over the next 30 days to offer new prices on drugs that are based off of what other countries pay, Doc Oz said on Monday. Like, okay, what if they just refuse? Because what the companies can do at this point is they can just be like, no, we're not paying those prices. You can suck our fucking nuts. You're going to give us what we want. And then this all just completely falls apart, right? They can just refuse. because they're not leveraging the power of the state in order to be able to force the companies into submission. So, Americans are unlikely to see immediate savings. Americans are unlikely to see relief on rising drug costs quickly because of the order, said Rachel Sachs, a health law expert at Washington University. It really does seem the plan is to ask manufacturers to voluntarily lower their prices to some point, which is not known. Yeah, because corporations, if you ask them very kindly and very nicely, are very well known to lower their fucking prices. And the thing is, you should immediately ask, like I said before, if they just say no and refuse to lower their prices, what then? What then, Trump? What in this brilliant scheme of yours do you have in mind in order to, try to remedy the situation? Oh, probably nothing. It's stupid, dude. That's why this policy is just not going to fucking work. Because the corporation can just be like, yeah, that's really funny and cute of you to say, but we're just going to say, no. The health department has the most authority to change the prices of drugs covered by Medicare and Medicaid because it can set regulations. Even still, the agency's power to do so is limited. Congress just approved in 2020 a new law that allows Medicare to negotiate the price it pays for a handful of prescription drugs starting in 2026. That's under the Inflation Reduction Act. It only affects like 10 drugs or some shit. It's nowhere near enough for the hundreds of different drugs that exist that get sold in America. But hey, a start is a start, I suppose. Before the law, Medicare paid what the drug companies charged, which was a lot of fucking money. This is how they made a fucking killing. Drug companies unsuccessfully sued over the implementation of the law. The price that millions of Americans covered by private insurance pay for drugs is even harder for the agency to manipulate. The U.S. routinely outspends other nations on drug prices, compared with other large and wealthy countries, a problem that has long drawn the ire of both major political parties, but a lasting fix has never cleared Congress. Whoa, crazy, because again, the Republican Party supports the drug corporations. They support the pharmaceutical companies. That's why it's never gonna fucking happen. Because one party is okay with, Americans paying way more fucking money for drugs. That's why. Like, it even said in the article itself, Trump has repeatedly defended the pharmaceutical companies. But, Trump came into his first political term accusing pharmaceutical companies of getting away with murder and complaining that other countries whose governments set drug prices were taking advantage of Americans. That is the fucking most stupidest dog shit on the fucking planet. No. Your pharmaceutical companies are the people who set the prices. That is the problem. It's not other countries that set the prices. This is like the populists' fucking idea of trying to do something about incredibly expensive drug prices. Right? It's not other countries, it's corporations, but they can't blame the corporations, right? Because in reality, they actually support them. Trump says he'll do the right thing. Ahead of the announcement, Trump popped up his rhetoric towards the industry again on social media, writing that the pharmaceutical/drug companies would say for years it was research and development costs, and all of the costs were and would be for no reason whatever, borne by suckers of America alone. See, he is correct when he says this, right? But the problem is he's saying that it's other countries that are doing this through the fact that they have state-owned healthcare programs. That is the fucking incongruence here. No. The problem is that there is very little regulation on pharmaceutical companies, something that he is not going to address. Referring to the drug company's powerful lobbying efforts, he said that the campaign's contributions can do wonders, but not with me and not with the Republican Party. We are going to do the right thing, he wrote. Several pharmaceutical companies gained ground in the stock market on Monday morning. Merck, a company that made $64.2 billion last year with the help of its cancer treatment, Keytruda, trumped 3.9%, and pharma giant Pfizer, which notched 63.6 billion in revenue in 2024, rose 2.5%, while Gilead Sciences rose 5.8%. That's a lot of money. Not to mention, with Operation Warp Speed, he basically made it such that all the profits would go to the fucking private corporations and not fucking funded solely through either Medicaid or Medicare when researching for the COVID-19 vaccine through Operation Warp Speed. One of the few good things that he did during his administration. So we can, broadly speaking, we see the problem here immediately, right? No, it's not the fault of other countries for having their own state-funded healthcare services that negotiate for drug prices. That's stupid. No. And all the fucking dipshits that he has circling around him as health advisors or whatever, they just hate disabled people. That is the point, right? They hate people who are sick because those are people that can't fucking, quite literally, contribute to the good of the state. Fascists, remember, as always, must always have it such that people must give their entire mind, body, and soul. Everything has to be to the contribution of the state. And even literally, it has been said in press conferences by Dr. Mehmet Oz not that long ago that it is patriotic to be healthy. What does he mean by that exactly? What does he mean by it's patriotic to be healthy? Exactly what it would probably mean, right? It should be fairly obvious. In order to be able to have healthy outcomes, it is your patriotic duty to be able to stay healthy. Never talking about any of the fucking companies at all, but solely talking about the fascist idea of how everything has to be given to the state. That is the problem here. No, that's not how that fucking works. It's silly and ridiculous. And also we have RFK Jr. with his rhetoric talk about well, personally I think that autistics need to be fucking genocided. So I mean, we also have that factor to fucking consider in the sort of patriotic healthcare duty. No. You want to be able to take care of drug prices, you do stuff like Biden did to the Inflation Reduction Act and have Medicare negotiate drug prices for, well, Americans. That's how you do it. You have the state use its power and the fact that, hey, we can easily just completely bowl you over and make you not exist anymore. We could do that. We could buy out your company and make it such that only taxpayer funded you only get money through taxpayer funding and you don't have to be a private institution anymore. We could just nationalize you. They could do that if they wanted to. If they want to play fucking hardball. But, that'll never happen in fucking America. And that's how, insulin costs got capped. You have to implement caps. You have to use the power of the state to do this, but as always, Republicans are all about dismantling and completely destroying the administrative state to be able to do anything in order to take care of its citizenry. They don't want that. So, therefore, their proposal is not actually going to work. It's not going to work, simply put. So that's pretty cool. Hey, let's do an experiment. I'll be Trump and you'll pretend to be the drug companies. Sure. Why don't we do a little role play? Okay, Zane. I am an executive at, let's say, Gilead Science. Okay, I'm an executive. I'm Pfizer. I'm a Pfizer executive. Okay, Mr. Trump, Mr. President, Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz and RFK Jr., what proposal do you have? You're great, guys. Could you lower your drug prices for our people? Why should we do that? We spend a lot of money on R&D in order to be able to research and make a lot more drugs for the benefit of the American people. Why should we? I mean, we do love the American people, but again, you would be able to because of these proposals, you're going to cut into a lot of our necessary research that we need to do, and that's very, very expensive for us. We need to be able to make sure that we have profits for our shareholders. I mean, to be able to provide as much possible good service. but you made Europe prices lower. No, they negotiated with us. We just negotiated drug prices with those guys, and they wanted us to be like, they basically said to us, you're not able to sell drugs within our market unless you cap prices at this particular amount. We agreed because we came to an agreement because we were able to get a certain amount of profit margin still. But, like, what are you saying? We need to make a lot of profits in order to be able to compensate for that within the American market for all of our R&D. Like, what do you mean? Yeah, wham. You see the problem here? They can just refuse. Like, a scenario like that can just play out. Obviously, like, did I do it, like, rhetorically perfectly or whatever? But no. No, I didn't do it rhetorically perfectly, but it can just play out like that. So that's the problem with this policy, right? It's not because of other nations being the problem. It's because Trump is okay with pharmaceutical companies making a profit off of the American people. He just wants to do the whole fucking faux populism bit. That's the point. So guess what? You're not actually going to get lowered drug prices through this proposal. Not at all. So, it's not going to fucking happen. It's not going to happen. So be prepared to still pay the same amount of money for drugs anyways. Nice meme. So just like I said, this proposal, it's not going to go anywhere, obviously. It's going to be pretty much dead on water because there's no state apparatus or enforcement mechanism that has been proposed by the Trump administration because they don't actually want to do that because in reality, he defends the pharmaceutical corporations and companies. So, to say, like, we're going to force you to pay what other countries pay, it's just like, why should we pay those? Like, you're not leveraging anything against us. We control the means of production. Like, you can fuck right off. And it's just like, darn it, damn it, it didn't work. What do we do now? I don't know. Just whatever. Like, you see the problem here. Like, broadly speaking, that's just how it's going to play out. And this is just like an executive order that's pretty much destined to, well, do basically nothing. Unless you threaten, like, nationalization of these corporations if they don't cap their fucking prices to a particular point. That's the actual solution to the problem. And every other country has seemingly fucking done it. Why can't the US? Oh, it should be fucking obvious. It's because both parties are fucking captured by pharmaceutical lobbies. That is the main fucking problem here. The corporations pay money to fucking the politicians so then they can skirt regulations. And the Republicans aren't going to do shit about that. Because even said in this article alone that Trump has, guess what, repeatedly defended pharmaceutical companies instead of blaming other countries for the high price Americans pay for drugs. This is a shifting of the blame. The blame should be with the pharmaceutical companies, not on the other countries for actually doing what they are supposed to do with their state funding, and that is negotiating for drug prices that they import in. It's silly. It's stupid. This executive order is pretty much dead on arrival. It's not going to fucking accomplish anything that the Trump administration thinks it's going to accomplish.